Hi, Artemis Paints here from exploitativepoker.com. In this video, I'll discuss the pros and cons of relying on a HUD for playing online poker. I'll explain why a reliance on HUD statistics may be detrimental to improving your game. So, what is a HUD? A HUD is a program which displays statistics on your opponents while you're playing poker online. The HUD displays statistics from hands that you played in the past, and you can select which of these statistics are shown on your HUD. Therefore, when you're playing online poker, you have access to this information. More importantly, after your poker session, you can go into your HUD and look for important pieces of information. There are HUDs that are allowed and HUDs that are not allowed by online poker sites. The HUDs that are not allowed provide statistics on the opponent's previous hands from games that you were not involved in. The HUDs that are allowed provide statistics from poker hands in which you were a player at the table. When you put statistics on your HUD, you should keep it simple. You can easily build an exploitative strategy around a few carefully chosen statistics. In this context, you should only display statistics on your HUD that you intend to use. Extra information becomes a distraction. Low sample sizes, statistics that have low sample sizes are not usable. Even if you have an idea of how you might use a statistic, it may not be possible or correct to use this statistics. The problem I see with a lot of players is that they have statistics on their HUD that in theory will give them useful information. The kinds of statistics that I'm talking about are statistics on the turn and river, such as fold to turn raise or fold to turn bet. In practice, such information is often useless. The main reason that the information is frequently useless is because there's not enough data. The sample size on many statistics is too small to base a decision or strategy on. Obviously, there are always more statistics on the early betting rounds compared to the later betting rounds, and this is because players frequently fold before the later betting rounds. On the turn and river, you should be able to make your decisions from information that you've gained pre-flop and on the flop. It's usually more accurate to use interpretation on the turn and river rather than turn and river HUD statistics. So let's talk about what kind of statistics that you might want to put on your HUD. So the first type of statistics that people use are player profiling statistics. In order to exploit your opponent, you need to have a general idea of how your opponent plays. If you've read a lot of poker books, you'll have some idea on how to use player profiling statistics. The first statistic is the VPIP or VP percentage. This statistic refers to the percentage of time a player voluntarily placed money into the pot. So this statistic tells you how tight or loose your opponent is. The bigger the VP percentage, the looser the player. The next player profiling statistic that people use is the PFR percentage. The PFR percentage is the percentage of time a player raised pre-flop, and this statistic will tell you how passive or aggressive your opponent is. For example, aggressive players tend to raise and re-raise, while passive players tend to limp and call more. So the next category of HUD statistics are 3-bet statistics. A 3-bet is when a player re-raises pre-flop after one player has already raised. The other 3-bet statistic that people use is the fold versus 3-bet percentage, and this statistic represents the frequency that a player raises pre-flop and then folds to a 3-bet. The next category of statistic is what I call an identifying fish statistic. The limp fold percentage represents the frequency that a player limps into the pot pre-flop and folds in response to a pre-flop raise. This statistic can be used when you're in late position and you're thinking of trying to get a limper to fold without seeing the flop. The value of this statistic is limited if you're watching the hand. This is because the gurus have taught everyone not to limp, and because of that, limpers stick out like a sore thumb. The next category of HUD statistics are stealing statistics. There's the attempt to steal statistic and the fold versus steal statistic. The attempt to steal statistic represents the frequency that a player raises first in from late position. Late position is like the cutoff and the button. If you're in the blinds, you would use this statistic to work out if the button or cutoff are stealing with a wide range of hands. The idea is, if your opponent is stealing with a wide range, you can consider 3-betting or just calling with weaker hands than usual. This is a statistic you need to be careful with. Good players steal more liberally against opponents who fold easily. They also look for seats where the opponents on the left are tight. If you're the type of player who plays back from the blinds, your opponent may change his strategy against you. He may only raise from steal positions against you when he has a strong range. The fold versus steal percentage measure represents the percentage of time a player folds in the blinds when a player raises from late position. This statistic is useful for players in late position in deciding whether to steal the blinds. If the blinds fold versus steal percentage is high, the players in late position can consider stealing with a weak range. Conversely, if the blinds fold versus steal percentage is low, the players in late position will need a stronger range to steal with. So let's look at the flop statistics. You don't need many flop statistics on your HUD. Post-flop, the strategies that you should use should be mainly based on piecing together the information that you get pre-flop with the information that you get on the flop. You can then use simple deduction to play on the turn and the river. So the flop C-bet percentage indicates how often a player raises pre-flop and then bets on the flop. This bet is often referred to as a continuation bet or a C-bet. If you miss the flop and your opponent's flop C-bet percentage is too high, you can consider trying to win the pot with a bluff raise on the flop or by floating the flop and betting the turn if your opponent checks on the turn. So the fold versus flop C-bet percentage indicates the percentage of time that a player folds to a C-bet. So if you have the lead in the hand and your opponent has a high fold versus flop C-bet percentage, you can consider bluffing when you miss the flop. So I don't use any turn statistics, and I only use one river statistic. In fact, I don't really use it anymore, but I used to. It's the bet river percentage. The bet river percentage measures how often a player bets on the river. The bet river percentage can help you get an idea of how often a player bluffs on the river. This statistic is not absolutely necessary. Observation is superior. Players at low and medium stakes don't adjust much. Consequently, there are some bluffs that you only need to observe once or twice to conclude that a particular bluff is a regular part of your opponent's game. For example, if you see a showdown where a player has bluffed with a busted draw, you can usually assume that this is a regular part of his game. And you can also find this information inside your HUD after your poker session. You can just look through the hands where your opponent bet on the river and lost at showdown, then look at the hands he bluffed with. This information can be useful when you want to induce a bluff on the river. The basis of exploitative poker is understanding your opponent's tendencies. A HUD is useful for identifying the player types at the table. However, there are pros and cons to using a HUD. For the pros, it's more important to use a HUD when playing online. If you're playing on several tables simultaneously, you will always need a HUD. This is because you won't be able to observe the hands on multiple tables easily. The HUD records your sessions, and therefore you can go into your HUD and look for specific information on a player. For the cons, there's only one con, but it's an important one. HUD statistics can be misleading when playing against players whose strategy depends on the playing style of their opponents. The pros outweigh the cons. In fact, there aren't any cons if you can distinguish between the players who adjust and those who don't. So that's all for this video. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.